one, because it's quite expensive to deal with pests. And as you know, we have a lot of land to protect on the West Coast. So the current government has made it much easier for corporations to plunder and tear up nature. They're putting profits before wildlife. The Green Party wants to work towards protecting 30% of land and ocean. We're going to expand funding for jobs for nature, and this is to protect biodiversity, and it will create thousands of regional jobs. And obviously the West Coast was so much more to protect. We'll get a lot more of those jobs. And we'll increase the public conservation funding, including supporting the predator-free 2050 goal. And again, that will be more pertinent here as well, because we've got a lot more to protect. We've got more than 4,000 native species under threat in New Zealand. And the choice is really clear. Either we properly fund this and have locally informed predator control, or we just let the extinction continue and we lose it. So a properly funded conservation system allows decisions to be made on the basis of local ecology, community views, and evidence base. We can't make conservation decisions on what's the cheapest or the easiest to deploy. We also support serious investment in research and rollout of alternatives to 1080. Always a big issue, this one. But while ensuring that any use of the 1080 is targeted, justified, and subject to proper scrutiny. Where communities oppose the use of aerial 1080 drops, government should be prepared to fund credible alternatives such as ground trapping, rather than forcing communities to accept a one-size-fits-all approach. Conservation has been really underfunded in this area, well, all over New Zealand. This one I'll read word for word for you. The party's biodiversity policy, it states that we will ensure that the invasive species are either exterminated or well managed and monitored, and no longer prevent indigenous species from flourishing, including by developing and prioritising humane and effective biological, chemical and physical invasive species control options, while recognising and applying the most effective options currently available. Now, the regional responsibilities, there's a lot of costs, and it's all being deferred downwards at the moment. We've sort of covered most of that with all the things we're already doing. So we actually are going to fund these things. We're going to fund the communities, we're going to fund the councils. So that leads to number 5, which is the one that most people are most interested in at the moment, which is local government reform. Because there's all sorts of pressure being put on councils to deal with it. So to be honest, the Green Party doesn't have a view on how local government should look as a final version. Because whatever it looks like needs to be led by local councils and by communities, not enforced top down from central government. What we will do is we will strengthen local democracy and we'll rebuild trust in decision making. And that's through fairer elections, stronger participation, more community-led processes. We'll transfer the administration of local government elections to the Electoral Commission. And we would like to enable a greater use of community-based decision-making process, such as the citizens' assemblies. And that's to get greater community input in the process for local government reorganisation. Again, one of the things we want to recognise is this particular council area is one of the most challenging of the lot, because you've got a massive area to cover with a very small rating base. So that was our main focus on looking at these things, is how to make it fair. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andrew. Questions, councillors?
No, I'll kick it up.
Yep.
Andrew, we're all familiar with the user pays policy, the polluter pays philosophy, and I just want to put the lens on pest management control. Now, particularly for the West Coast, the West Coast has got something like 12% of the DOC estate nationwide.
Yep.
86% of our land here is DOC estate. The other 14 is private land. Do you think it's equitable and fair that the property owner where these pests come from should be paying therefore 86% of the local provincial cost?
So look,
not put on the landowner.
So our policy is that we want to invest in predator control. So that's not putting it on to the individual landowner to pay for everything. This is government funded support for predator control. Because it recognises that the national park and conservation land that is recognised as being critically important for the protection of the species that are under threat is a New Zealand thing. It's not a West Coast thing. This is for all of us, this land. The protection of that is for all of New Zealand. So that's why the government funding that we want to put through all this to get more jobs for nature jobs into it and predator control funding is central government supported.
Yeah, excuse me for asking, mate. 86% of the land on the coast, and that's where you're standing. That's Nelson.
Is
Has-
that, yeah.
Do you think 80%, 86% of the cost of pest control in our province, the electorate that you're seeking to be the member of, should be Crown funded?
I'd need to check the Green Party policy on that as such, but my understanding is that our aim is to put a lot more money into jobs for nature and a lot more money into predator control. That's a central government funding that will be divvied up based on what's needed to be done. And as you say, 86% of the land on the West Coast is in that category. So I would probably be comfortable to make the assumption that there'd be a lot more jobs for nature jobs going here than there will be in the Canterbury Plains, for example.
Thanks.
Yeah, and
Well, what worries me about that, you're gonna have the taxpayer paying for the pest control. And like the jobs for nature, and that's a very inefficient way to control pests. Why don't we turn them into a resource?
So we mentioned ground trapping as alternatives. But one of the things that we're really clear about in the Green Party is that we will do things evidence-based. We're not going to go off and go, we think this is the right thing to do, because this is what we're doing. We work on evidence-based. So when we're looking at predator control and we're looking at these, we will work, and also the other thing that we're quite clear is we will work with local communities, local councils. The local people are the ones who know best it's going to work around the area. So we're going to look at their input, we're going to look at the evidence-based input, put these policies in place, because the way the money's spent in place.
will, just following on from Councillor Campbell's question, will the Green Party, would the Green Party, if there are economic ways of utilising pest species, such as like on venison, goat, etc., if opportunities are identified and put to government in terms of establishing overseas markets for fuel, meat, etc., would the Green Party support those options in terms of establishing a market to make sure that these pest animals become an economic return to New Zealand?
So I think in answer to your question again, everything that we look at is always evidence-based. So we're not going to go off half-cocked and go, we know the best thing to do, this is what it's going to be. We're going to look at all the evidence involved, we're going to look at all the information involved. So we're not closed to any options. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
So
If a operator on the West Coast and has sourced an international market, and there is regulation or there is policy that would in any way make it difficult for that operator to export that product to a foreign market, would the Green Party, does the Green Party see that there is possibly an economic opportunity in the use of pest species?
So again, I come back to it's all evidence-based in what we do. So we don't close our minds to anything that's coming up. If something's presented to us and it's viable, it's not going to badly impact the environment, it's going to provide an economic return, it's something that's going to work locally, and all the evidence says that this works, then that's the sort of thing we'll support. If something comes back and goes, look, it's a really great financial thing, but it's going to destroy that forest, but hey, it's lots of money, we're probably going to go, yeah, maybe not, because it's got to be evidence for everyone.
Thanks, Andrew. Any other questions, Tim?
Just your corporate taxes.
Yep.
Yeah, how much are you proposing?
It's a really good question. I don't know the exact amount, but I do know,
120.
I do know that the corporate tax that we're proposing is only for companies with over $30 million turnover. So we're not going for the smallest companies. We're not going for the average customer companies. We're going for the largest ones of the lot.
But the only problem is it's liable to drive them overseas.
So
So
what you're talking about is the you're talking about the wealth bailout thing where people run off and take all their money with them. So my simplest answer to this one is not many corporates that earn $30 million a year have got $30 million a year cash sitting there in their hands that they're just going to tuck under their arm and bugger off. They've generally got land, businesses, things, and it's really hard to take a massive farming enterprise and stick it on a barge and take it with you. For them to leave, they've got to sell it. Someone else is going to come in and buy it. If you look at Portugal, which is the most recent country that's done this, they're showing a massive economic growth as a result of putting this in place. And they're showing a very small number of people running. And the people that run, they've got to sell off their stuff. So someone else is going to come in and buy it. It's not the big scare that everyone's got. I don't know if Fletcher's, when they're not going to load one of their high-rise buildings and take them away with them, they'll sell it first. And
the other thing, it's quite well known that the Greens are sort of anti-mining and stuff like that. Will that still be the case?
So there's a couple of things around mining that people miss with the Greens. And I get this question a lot. Recently, a local sent thing through on Facebook. I run a small coffee business at Potts River, and he listed every single metal that was in the coffee machine. And my reply was, "That's really good. I've also got a cell phone, and I've also got a vehicle." So the Green Party is not against mining per se. They're against mining done in the wrong place, in the wrong way, and we recognise that this is a finite supply. There's only what we've got on the planet. Now, if we want to take it all now and some people make a lot of money, that's great for them. But what about the generations to come? So we need to move towards moving away from extractive industries and find other job opportunities, other ways for us to be able to achieve. We can't go overnight. And a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you guys just want to shut down the mines." I would just put the challenge out there and ask you, how many times have you seen the Green Party shut a mine overnight and turn it down compared to how many times you've seen a mining company shut a mine down overnight and turn the lights off? Generally, they close because it's not economic. And that's the bottom line for everyone. Coal at the moment, we've got the issue going on up in Westport. And I was just reading the other day that India is trying to reduce its coal imports and reduce the price that it pays, and the price that we're asking for in New Zealand, they don't want to pay that anymore. And we're seeing a move immediately. Glenbrook has just gone to their new pot line, which is without coal for steel. And that technology was created at Victoria University. This is one of the very early stages of this happening, which is going to happen worldwide. So if we're relying solely on mining, then we're not being responsible to our communities. I was born on the coast. I've seen 2 gold rushes in my time and 2 slumps straight away up the end of them. We've got to make sure that we do more than just focus that way. So in answer to the question, we are and we aren't against it. We're against it done the wrong way, but we want to work towards going there. Another person also hit me with the line about, because we use the term just transition. And someone came and fired at me and said, "Oh, come on, just transitions never worked." And my response was, "Well, when has it actually been tried? Has anyone done it?" The concept of just transition is support and financial support into communities from central government to develop industry so that people retain their jobs. And it's done by working with communities to work from one position to another. It's not to say this must stop now, because that doesn't work. You can't do that to a community. And sadly, the big companies are quite happy to do it.
But Andrew, it was a lot in the Green faction that actually halted the Waitara power station, and we need that power to fuel like the steel mill and that.
So if you look at the Waitaha power station, I'm happy to send through to you. I've got a whole heap of documentation here about the KVAs, the amount of power that they produce versus the other options that are available on the West Coast. And that one is probably not as viable as some of the other ones on the West Coast that are a bit easier to do and produce more power and still provide what you need community-wise. The other thing that the Green Party's doing with their power supply thing is our current power policy. We are looking at funding homes, funding farms to put more solar power into them so that that will help provide some resilience. And the biggest power issue we have in New Zealand is what they call the dry year problem, which is where we've got a significant amount of hydropower. We have a dry year, we run out of power. So therefore we've got to go to fossil fuel backup. So part of our plan is to create a company which is New Zealand owned called Kiwi Power, which is to reduce the dry year problem by investing more into solar, wind and geothermal. So if we've got solar, wind and geothermal in a dry year, they're producing a lot of power, reducing the pressure on the water supply.
Sorry for turning up late. Or just another meeting. My name's Mark McIntyre. What's your thoughts on coal mines? Has it been talked about yet? Sorry.
Yes.
Yep, has.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. We did cover that part of that.
Okay. What's your thoughts?
So, well, the Green Party has quite clearly stated that we're not completely against mining as such. We're against mining in the wrong place in the wrong way. But we also recognise we've got finite reserves on our planet, and we need to start the process of just transition. We were actually
What about coal mining?
about 6 months ago, we were right on the brink of sitting down at Bathurst with the senior management crew to have a talk about the whole process with them, but unfortunately another group sort of did a protest and it got in the way, and we had to defer the meeting. So we are working with coal.
So what's your thoughts? Like I'm talking about high coking coal here for making steel, carbon, solar panels.
Yep. So the high coking coal for steels, we covered this just before. Currently in India, they're actually trying to reduce the use of this. And what they're also quite clearly saying is that there's a certain price that they won't pay. And the price that they're talking about is what we currently get. They don't want to pay that anymore. But if you look at Glenbrook has just changed part of its steel mill to steel without coal. So, and that's New Zealand-based technology. This is something that's going to grow worldwide.
Yep.
So there's going to be a reduction in coal. Bathurst Tally's response to the Glenbrook thing was that they're just going to lay off 200 of their staff up in Huntley. The problem with big mining companies is if you put all of your eggs in a basket with a big mining company, you are putting your community at risk by relying on international market pressure and their own market pressure. The companies like that have no loyalty to anything but their profit and to their shareholders. And if things change, which they are changing fast across the world, at any point it could stop.
So that you could say the same about forestry and so that's our whole economy, really.
Well, there's a lot of other things we could start bringing into our economy to start changing it. There's one of the things I've talked about a lot about is the supporting smaller business operations on the West Coast. If we provided incentive for small companies to move here, they've got cheaper real estate, cheaper rentals. They could operate. A lot of these businesses, remote businesses, can operate here. And if let's say we created support for 100 businesses to provide 3 people 3 jobs each, that spreads that load across 300 jobs across 100 businesses. Now, those businesses, if you get 1 or 2 breaking, it's 3 jobs at a time. It's not too bad. But in a small community, if you're relying on businesses that have 100, 300, 400 workers, and something goes wrong, then it's devastating. And we're up in Bulla, we're dealing with that at the moment. We've just had Tully's close its door. We've had the sand mine close its door. And there's economic considerations that they put in there. And that had 40 jobs and 100 jobs overnight disappeared. That's a massive impact on a small community. So we want to look at diversifying business options.
Peter?
Just Andrew, your comment on the Waitaha. Given that it's the result of a small, very successful company domiciled here on the West Coast, and your comment about the Waitaha, would the Green Party be receptive then to any coalition arrangements with any successful party at the election? Would you be of a mind to overturn the fast track decision for the Ranard River Weir hydro scheme?
I think that the Green Party have actually clearly put their policy out where you park. The Green Party have stated that they don't support fast track, that it should go through proper process so that communities can be involved in the decision-making process of what happens around them as well. So I think, I'm not 100% on this, I'm fairly certain that our statement was that we would put all fast track applications on hold until they go back through the proper policy.
It's already been approved. It's already been approved, this one. That's the question. So would you overturn the decision?
I don't know the answer to that one. I know the ones that are in process that they'll stop. I don't know about ones that have been approved. So I'll have to come back to you on that one.
Andrew, other parties have indicated that that applications that are lodged and within the fast track system would not be interfered with. Is that not the Green Party's position?
I think that the Green Party's position is that any that are in process will be halted and looked at under a proper process. So the problem with fast track, so the thing about fast track is that someone comes along and goes, we've got an economic idea that's really good. And if we look at some of the fast track things that are out there, a lot of them look very dodgy. And you have to say, when you look at some of the ones there, there's not a lot of process has gone into it, not a lot of thought has gone into it. And we don't want to have a whole massive thing happening that has implications that might not be good for us. The case in point of this is the AI data centres. We haven't actually looked at the impact of what that can do. Internationally, when you look at what it does, generally it makes the price for electricity go up for the community and for the country. So we've got at the moment 16 of those being proposed, one that's done and dusted. Now we really need to stop and think about this and just make sure we get it right. It's not about just, it needs to be done properly. And this goes back to something that we've quite clearly said, is that we are evidence-based in what we do. And that covers everything. If it's something that is going to be good for the community, isn't going to cause too much issues, it is the best option for what we need, then it's more than likely that we're going to support it. If it comes out that says there's something that's actually better, easier, and less damaging, we're going to go that direction because that's the best way to go. And we will talk with the communities about it. We're not hard and fast. And one of the great things about the Green Party for me is that policy for the Green Party is actually written from the membership of the Green Party. It starts with the people involved and it moves upwards to where it becomes what we put as our policy. And we believe the local government, we need to look at the same thing of having the community involved in their decision-making process, because generally the people who live in the area have got the best idea about what the impacts will be. So if a decision is being made externally from somewhere else, it doesn't seem right. Same with local government reform. I'm sure you guys are less than happy about the fact that the central government says we're going to tell you what to do. Doesn't seem fair.
So just another question, Andrew. As time has gone on, central government has forced more and more responsibility down to local government, but without resourcing and without funding.
Yeah.
So if the Green Party were in government and central government was going to put another whole suite of obligations on local government, would the Green Party ensure that there was proper resourcing from central government to implement that new suite of arrangements?
So here's the critical point about this. The Green Party has quite clearly stated that they're going to support local government. They're going to put resources down. Climate adaptation is probably the biggest thing affecting rural communities, and on the West Coast particularly. We're going to invest in that. But critically, what we need is your party vote. Let's do it. So if we have enough people in Parliament and we have enough sway in Parliament, we will do that. That is what we have committed to, is to looking after the communities. And one of the things about the Green Party that people always miss, it says people and planet. It doesn't say planet and people. So it's about communities first.
So just in answering the question, because I don't think that quite answered the question. So if central government were to provide another suite of obligations
Yes.
on local government.
Yep.
Would the Green Party, if in government, ensure that in imposing those new obligations, they would also ensure that there was resourcing for local government to do it?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But again, it goes to if we have enough sway in government to do it.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. Any other questions? Okay, thanks very much, Andrew.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
For listening in.
No, thank you.
No problem.
Yep.
Okay.
You guys were nowhere near as harsh as I thought you were going to be.
Why arrived late?
We're pretty tough.
It's a familiar face.
Okay, to all those online and councillors, Jamie, you know all the councillors here, don't you?
Yep, pretty much.
Okay, well, welcome today. Thanks for coming along and giving us opportunity to both our community who are online and councillors to discuss the matters that we've set out to you, those 5 principal questions. First one being sustainable funding for regional New Zealand. Second, on climate adaptation and community resilience. Third, biosecurity. 4, increasing regional responsibilities. And 5, your views on local government reform. Over to you, Jane.
Cool, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and councillors, for the opportunity. For starters, it's a new one, I think, for the regional council to extend it to general election candidates in this way, so I appreciate that. Quick background, so I'm the candidate for New Zealand First. We're running a 2-tick campaign, so we're serious about trying to win this seat for New Zealand First. Former Mayor of Bulla, almost 10 years in local government, and prior to that, currently still in the farming sector. So just a bit of background for people. Okay, straight into your questions. On your first question around sustainable funding for regional New Zealand. So it's our view that that too often regional New Zealand has been deprioritised, particularly by the major parties. They have been drawn into satisfying their voter base, which tends to be urban. And so our view and our party's view is that regional New Zealand is and can once again be the powerhouse of the New Zealand economy. During my time as mayor, and a number of you would have been around in that time, I was part of a sustained regional advocacy for investment that considered the whole West Coast, and we were quite united in that call. It was strategic and it was staged, and in my view, there's a lot of unfinished business in terms of that delivering on that strategy. As a party, New Zealand First answered that call over the past sort of nine years that I was involved in local government through the Provincial Growth Fund, firstly, and more recently the Regional Infrastructure Fund. They are constructs of New Zealand First. Every government New Zealand First has been involved and has insisted on regional funding of that nature in one form or another. And for this region, that's brought around $375 million to the table. And like I said before, not as ad hoc individual project spending, but in answering the call from this region for a strategic pipeline of investment into activities over the last 9 years or so. So that investment has supported seed funding into mining, minerals processing, ports that underpin fishing and multimodal transport, resilience and recovery work, rail investment, Hokitika Airport, tourism projects such as the Punamu Pathway and Punakaiki Cycle Trail, Punakaiki and the cycle trails. We consider that as having set some really strong foundations, and the next step is to ignite that growth and keep addressing the legacy infrastructure issues, challenges. We think we would do that. So back to the funding side of things, we think there's a fundamental refocus required for the Department of Conservation to refocus it on its core conservation responsibilities and see that as quite separate from the economic opportunity that sits with the less significant dock land. That's part of a suite of changes. Some of it tied into the broader planning work as well, but where access where it's appropriate, faster concessions, enabling some of that land for mineral extraction and other productive land uses. Central to our party's policy is the mining royalties program, and again that came from advocacy from the West Coast Mayors, Chairs and iwi group, and that policy is very well aligned to what this region asked for in terms of what a mining royalties policy might look like. And that is that 50% of mining royalties will return to the region where mining occurs, and for those funds to be invested in infrastructure that delivers intergenerational benefits. So it's trying to solve that challenge we always get from those who are anti-mining, if you like, that mining doesn't benefit communities long term, and it gets rid of that boom bust cycle. And countries that have done that well have invested while the times were good into enduring intergenerational infrastructure, and that is what New Zealand First policy will require. How that is distributed and how that is prioritised, we think that is a West Coast conversation for the West Coast to have as to how the mechanisms and things are obviously up for debate. What isn't up for debate is that 50% of royalties will be coming back to the region. New Zealand First also announced a policy to establish a $100 billion future fund, and that is to support a national 30-year infrastructure strategy focused on practical and common sense local solutions where we can. So less gold plating and more practical and delivery. Just quickly on the royalties policy is, I think that's often what's lost in that conversation is that the royalties is only one part of a suite of policy changes around the mining sector. So not only obviously is that going to unlock some funding back to the regions, but it's actually also included in that policy as some better planning and some economic zones targeting to enable mining to be much more quickly consented. So new mining zones, so clearer rules where mining is already an important part of the economy.
Through the chair, can we ask questions as we go along, or do we ask at the end?
Let Jamie go through
And then we'll ask at the end.
Note your question down and we'll ask questions.
Sorry, Jamie.
So that suite also includes better geological surveys, understanding what we actually have across New Zealand in terms of our mineral resources. It invests in some new technology around that science base of what those resources are. It looks to value add, so we move away from just a dig and ship model into more of a processing onshore. It includes the skills and workforce development, so revisiting the likes of a school of mines and investing in training for high paying jobs, and what better place to host that than on the West Coast. Further investment into mines rescue, creating that regulatory environment that encourages that long-term investment and job creation that the mining sector requires. So as we've seen in projects like in Reefton, there's $400 million gone into that project, and there's been no checks banked yet from it because of the front loading of the capital intensive nature of development of that sector. So those industries need confidence and they need to know the future ahead. So things like enabling consents to be issued for the life of the mine and the life of the mine plus rehab, I think gives projects or big companies much better opportunity to plan what their how they will deliver that project and invest into the community. So that's where I see the opportunity for the West Coast in terms of your first question, which was sustainable funding for regional New Zealand. I think if we can unlock a lot of what's already here, cut a lot of red tape and enable a lot more growth, that will aid a lot in terms of the community as well as the mining royalties coming back to the region. And the $1 billion future fund, which is an intergenerational, obviously. I'll move on to your second question, the climate adaptation and community resilience piece. So New Zealand's first view on that is that communities like the West Coast are already living with the impacts of severe weather. That's well known to most of us. And the priority has to be about practical adaptation. So stronger flood protection, better drainage programs, resilient roads, bridges, and strong community planning. New Zealand First has got a really clear track record already of backing regional flood resilience through the Regional Infrastructure Fund. On the coast, that's included flood protection and resilience work in places like Westport, Greymouth, Otago, Brands, around 16 million already directed to those schemes. Obviously, there's a lot more we would like to do there. We think we need to get better at preventing and mitigating hazards or disaster strikes. It's far better to invest in things like stock banks and river management and coastal resilience upgrades than keep paying for cleanup after damage. We acknowledge that small ratepayer bases cannot carry national scale climate adaptation costs on their own, and New Zealand First supports a fairer partnership between central and local governments so that communities facing high natural hazard risks are not left to fund resilience alone. Government already is moving towards clearer adaptation planning and better flood risk information, and that matters to the coast because communities, insurers, councils and investors need reliable information to make those sensible long-term decisions around what they build and where. Our whole approach to climate is based on science and innovation and practical transition, not punishing farmers, miners and manufacturers or regional households before there are realistic alternatives available to them. We believe that we can protect the environment whilst reducing risk and still grow regional economies. For the West Coast, we believe our climate policy has to recognise the uniqueness of locality. So geography, rainfall, rivers, transport vulnerability and the limits of the small rating base. In terms of biosecurity, question number 3. I see this work as critical to the West Coast. I personally have quite a concern that biosecurity could be lost or weakened through the local government reform. I think it's really important that that function and the importance of that work isn't lost. I think we can learn a lot from the bovine TB work that's been done in New Zealand, where they've focused on areas and not eliminated, but largely eliminated bovine TB on the West Coast, and taking that targeted science-based approach to get that particular issue into a manageable context. But we also believe that regional ratepayer bases can't carry that responsibility alone. So New Zealand First supports a stronger central local government partnership for prevention, surveillance and pest management with funding certainty rather than short-term stop-start programs. We do support a science-based approach using the best tools available, where there's development in terms of AI-enabled trapping and resettable traps and all those sort of innovations that are already with us, supporting further development of those. We believe in the scope to better monetize and support local trapping programs and food processing, commercial hunting, where it contributes to that pest control, local jobs and regional resilience. And we've seen some really good examples lately of the volunteer hunters working with butcheries that are mincing stuff and providing it to the food banks and things like that, which seems to be a brilliant idea and really doesn't cause any disruption to otherwise commercial food chain, because those people are not able to afford meat anyway. So putting it into a food bank arrangement seems a really good, sensible way to go. So yeah, deer, pigs, goats, they need to be managed properly. Sustainable hunting can be a part of that toolbox, but it has to sit alongside ecological safeguards and the clear sort of public interest outcomes. So I think it's around understanding the pest you're trying to manage and making using all the tools in your toolbox to try and manage that. We don't support a full privatisation of pest eradication or allowing access to that conservation estate to become effectively privatised or captured by a narrow interest. And there's one political party that's proposing that, which we don't necessarily support. Again, I said before a little bit about DOC being focused on its core delivery, core responsibilities, and where pest control on dockland can be delivered more effectively by specialist agencies or councils or, you know, Osprey type models, local partnerships, then that absolutely should be considered and funded. It's all about that environmental policy around economic and environment working together, and obviously the pest issue is quite pertinent to the interaction that all our private landowners have with the dock estate so much on the West Coast. Move on to regional responsibilities. So we acknowledge that if Parliament creates new responsibilities for councils, then central government has to be honest about how they're paid for. And small regions like the West Coast can't keep absorbing national policy through rates alone. We think we'll address a lot of that through cutting unnecessary red tape. So we support that. We support reducing the regulatory burden, duplication, process costs. Rules should be targeted to protect what matters, but they have to be workable for councils, landowners, farmers, miners, and communities. The replacement of the RMA, we believe, will make planning faster, clearer, more consistent, and stronger national direction and less local duplication. The focus should be on enabling infrastructure, housing, prime industries, and regional development, while still protecting the environment, the bits of the environment that matter. And again, that's important that that is cognizant of the variations around New Zealand in terms of the environment that activities are taking place in. We are strongly opposed to regulatory overreach, though, that undermines property rights. So an example was brought up by Governor Shane Jones on his trip here a week or so ago around TTPP and significant natural areas. And he indicated that we're less than happy with the cost, obviously, of the TTPP and the complexity of it, that it is burdening our community at the moment. And we would seek to relieve that burden through legislation or pausing of the TTPP until we get a better understanding of what some of the other national policy direction and RMA changes that are coming in, that we know are coming in, particularly around SCNAs. Now, I know the TTPP committee petitioned Minister Hoggard at the time for that, and he chose not to intervene. Mr. Jones indicated that if he was minister in charge, he would have sought to pause the TTPP, which was a request of the committee at the time. Local government reform, question 5. Here we go for time. So New Zealand First supports local government reform, especially given the structural changes already underway through the RMA, regional planning, water services. It's clear that the current models are becoming too costly and complex for many ratepayers. We believe that if councils are asked to deliver more regional responsibilities, then the structure and scale of local government must be fit for purpose, and reform must reduce duplication and improve delivery, not simply shift costs around. New Zealand First, we support councils leading reform with their communities and designing practical local solutions. And that is what I think is the opportunity for the West Coast at the moment. But what we have said is that if councils procrastinate or fail to produce viable governance arrangements, then don't be surprised if central government steps in and prescribes something on the West Coast. Because we say that because everywhere we go in the country, we're hearing frustration from ratepayers with councils in one form or another around the complexity of engaging with them, obviously the building costs that are coming through it and rates, bills and the like. So we're not prepared to ignore that question, but obviously our preference is that the West Coast sorts out what governance arrangements should look like. If it doesn't, then we support the Crown having a role in determining what that looks like. I think we should also look at the opportunity that this conversation actually has, and I think it's far more than banging 3 councils or 4 councils together into one big amalgamated council. It actually opens an opportunity for much broader discussion, a much bigger strategic discussion for the West Coast, and I'm confident that the heads that are around the table now will carry on with that work. But this, to me, this conversation opens up the conversations around regional deals. It opens up conversations around mining royalties and how that flows through. It opens up around allocation of roading funding. The whole gamut of funding that is in various pots with central government could be a conversation that the West Coast leads off the back of the local government organisational change. And I say that because so much of what we all engage with on the coast now is already planned or delivered regionally. We do it with tourism, we do it with economic development, we do it with destination planning, we do it with health, education, police, St. John, FINS, all are managed and funded with a regional lens, except for local government. And I think that's the bit that there's plenty of examples of us working really well with co-agencies and partner agencies, and I think that's what the West Coast hopefully will explore. And that's probably it. I mean, I think the goal for the coast should be a West Coast governance model that's efficient and affordable, locally accountable, and capable of speaking with that strong regional voice to central government. And it's not a construct of the current government. I think at least the last 3 governments have been tracking towards wanting to talk to regions, not individual councils. And I think the more regionally united we can be, the stronger we are as a West Coast, and that's what New Zealand First supports.
Thanks, Jamie. Mark, you had a question?
She answered the question.
Peter?
Thanks for coming, Jamie. Climate adaptation and climate community resilience slash flood mitigation for our major towns. The government's given tens of millions of dollars for it. Do New Zealand First think it's a wise practice and preventable to strangle our rivers by infilling their immediate flood capacity carrying channels next to these towns, historic flood channels?
What do you mean by filling?
By filling them in. They're there for a purpose, nature made them.
Yeah.
And we come along and we give consent to an operator to fill them in.
Oh, shouldn't be giving consent for operators to fill them in. No.
Excellent answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we need to there's definitely parts of the West Coast that aren't suitable for development. And because I think it's a legitimate means of managing flood risk. Is you're not going to engineer your way out of every solution. So there's a toolbox approach.
We don't score our own goals either.
Yeah, well, yeah, but there's clearly a massive need to create confidence in the property market, insurance market, investment market. Everyone who's involved, who's flood affected or at risk of flooding, if you can raise that level of confidence and security they feel by engineering a flood wall, and that's a viable solution, then that is absolutely a justifiable use of funds. But I think we need to be cognizant too of vulnerable areas that are very difficult to protect long term, and we need to make sure that our planning captures those appropriate mechanisms around that as well, whether that's different building standards or on-site mitigations or right building, right place, right kind of thinking.
Some of the problem, Jamie, is that you're not allowed to put a bulldozer in the creek or a river now unless you go and get a $30,000 consent, and it's just not worth it.
Yep.
So then hence the creek falls up and out she goes.
Yeah, so we think a lot of that we covered off in the cutting of red tape stuff. So obviously the local solutions enabling that to happen. There's obvious benefit in removing gravel in rivers. you know, but again, it's one of the tools in the toolbox. It's not gonna deal with every river. You can take as much gravel as you like out of the Buller River, and, you know, there are consents in place to take considerable amounts of gravel out, but it's about who pays for that and what it's used for, and that as well, but it doesn't sit alone from the need for protections.
Thanks, Jamie. The mining royalty, just going back to that, I think, was it, if I'm correct, is it 50% was going to come back to communities? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, so it's 50% of royalties, but also linked with that, because at the moment, 50% is not a huge number.
No,
But it's linked with what we see as it's huge growth potential in the sector.
yeah,
Through the different economic zones, you know, rebuilding an industry effectively, through giving that confidence to them, and, you know, the other consenting changes, the life of mine consenting, that kind of concept.
getting 100% to zero.
Yeah, and so, you know, the number is considerable coming back.
Thank you.
So Jamie, is that based on, that position based on the fact that mining companies come into a region and, they use the infrastructure, they use the stormwater, they use the water systems, et cetera, et cetera. So is that part of ensuring that when a mining company is here and it's operating, that it is, that from that royalty, there is a return to the local government in terms of ensuring that it can upgrade and improve its infrastructure?
Yes, so that's around creating that enduring legacy beyond the life of the mine. So into community infrastructure benefits all. That's one element of it. The other element of it is that there are certain investments that you can do that help accelerate and facilitate more growth in that space. And I think Reefton is a classic example. Like, so I mean, I would imagine, and I can speak hypothetically, but if the Buller District Council knew that there was a chunk of mining royalties to come to the Buller District Council, off the back of mining developments in Reefton, they wouldn't hesitate in enabling civil infrastructure to enable more housing for those workers there. But at the moment, there's this disconnect between the town is struggling to cope with, you know, another 200, 300 houses that it might need to enable the growth. You know, it's the chicken and egg situation. So it's about that system, for the system to have confidence that not only council and communities can invest in growth, but then the sector that's coming to invest for the mine itself have confidence that that's going to be able to be put in place.
So if you stick with that analogy, tourism uses uses our infrastructure, our water and sewer and all the other infrastructure, roading, you name it. So would New Zealand first support, in order to ensure that tourism as an industry actually puts back into infrastructure? Would you support allocation of IVL to local government?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's done a little bit now has been done through the tourism infrastructure funding, so a contestable fund. The West Coast done quite well out of that over the years, but absolutely versions of that from the visitor levy. I think there'll be some opportunities through our splitting up of the Department of Conservation. Will create new concessionable activities, those sort of things, chargeable, you know, sellable activities on the state for more small businesses and things to do tours and, you know, nature tours and whatever. So yeah, we anticipate that those settings will create a much more growthy feel around tourism as well.
So rather than the IVL being contestable fund, which means central government still has a very big say in it, would it be better to for IVL to be distributed to the regions based on tourism activity in each region, so that the region knows it can rely on that funding coming to it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think I'm not sure if the party has a specific policy on that as yet, but that would absolutely be in line with that. And certainly the original thinking around the mining royalties coming back to the coast was that mining royalties would be tipped into one big pot. So would IVL, and that would be, you know, and again that would be a prioritisation process for the West Coast to determine, you know, actually there's sense in this first investment for tourism going into toilet block somewhere or whatever, and, you know, Westland versus Buller.
Chris, and then you, Ash.
Just on mining royalties, it's all very well having, 50% of the royalties coming back to the regions, but would you think that the royalties that are paid now, like, are only peanuts of the actual, royalty? It's almost like the fishing one, there's 1 cent per kilogram of fish over the wharf, and I think the royalty of mining is just peanuts. So even if we got 100% of, as Mark said, 100% of almost nothing is not that much anyway.
Yeah.
Would you think of raising that percentage?
Yeah, so it's a revamp of the royalties scheme itself as well. So there's certain historic ones which I think are quite difficult to change, where projects are already established. They've established under a certain royalty regime, but there's definitely an appetite to.
Well, the problem with that is, but you're saying that life of mine, grant a license for the life of the mine, and if you're locked into a royalty, as you say, then you can't change it.
Yeah, so it's a revamp of the royalties scheme, so new mining, and obviously there's considerable new potential in the critical minerals space that is largely untapped as yet. So we see growth there. Look, the numbers in the proposal, I think are around 6 or 7 million a year at the moment in royalties from the West Coast. If growth was to occur, yes, I understand that number is getting up into the 25, 30, 40 million a year, so half of that. So it starts to be quite a reasonable amount of money.
Ashley?
GST return rates earned or bid tax, what's the party position on those two?
GST can't say I've read anything on that.
Yes.
Bid tax, again, I think we would be interested in the science behind that or the mechanism. We're not a party that's necessarily looking to cut tax. We recognise that New Zealand has some pretty big investment challenges ahead of it, so it's around making sure that tax applied is fair. So whether there's an opportunity to go down that road, I can't say specific policy. Our full manifesto hasn't actually come out yet; it's another weeks away.
And you mentioned a fairer kind of deal between central government and local share in terms of flood infrastructure. Currently 60-40. Have they got a line in the sand? 70-30, 100-0, 80-20. The fairer share would sit.
I haven't seen that yet.
Peter, and then you, Mark.
West Coast amalgamation proposal. It's going to sink or swim on finance. It's going to cost a lot of money. Now you've got 4 councils where, let's not cut the mustard on it, 4 insolvent councils ain't going to make 1 solvent council. It's going to be 1 big insolvent council.
Yeah.
So where do you see the part to play with the booty that Development West Coast has got sitting there? Are they part of the solution too? Maybe the seeding funding to get this thing up to speed and not set up to fail, because it ain't got money, it's going to fail.
Yeah. So I think the Development West Coast question is one for the settle, and I think
we can't magic up a money tree though, can we?
yes, absolutely. But I mean, I think that is what the amalgamation conversation needs to cover off West Coast arrangements, and that's what I think I was referring to before. Is it is an opportunity to have that conversation, and I think that is the bit that needs to be returned. But the Crown definitely has a role to play in funding the analysis and the transition. Doing the work to establish what is the go forward proposal.
If I can expand what Peter's saying, the Head Start proposal that's gone on from West Coast has made it very, very clear that unless there's some form of regional deal, unless in the reform process there is a sustainable fiscal underpinning of whatever the new government's arrangement on the West Coast is, there is going to be no success going forward.
Yeah.
So the question is, will New Zealand First ensure that as part of the local government reform there will be a viable fiscal underpinning of any new arrangement for the West Coast.
There has to be, that has to be part of the picture, but I don't think, after what I've just explained through answering all of your questions, is none of these things are in isolation. So you've got 4 core councils now, but actually, what if there's a infrastructure fund that is taking, you know, a lot of your commitments around flood infrastructure off your hands? What if Three Waters is being funded a different way? What if, you know, we're cutting a whole lot of this red tape? What if your TTPP is shrunk down to something more workable? What if you don't have to get consent for every mining program? Then your costs look a whole lot different as well when you're staffing and everything else. So
I would agree with you there, Jamie, but yesterday's announcement about the new Auckland Harbour Bridge, there ain't going to be much money in the kitty for anyone else or any other project in the country.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's a difficult one because there's so much changing, but I think it's not lost, certainly not lost on New Zealand First that those, you know, the community has a limited ability to keep absorbing more of these costs. But there is also we're feeling a majority sentiment from the community that the expectation is that something needs to be changed and should be looked at. So, you know, I think Mr. Jones made it quite clear that we're not going to resolve from the need for that change to happen. And I think you guys have.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, amalgamation's got to happen. It may be a disaster without funding, but if amalgamation didn't happen, it'd be a catastrophe the way we're going. The trajectory's here to go one way.
The question we're saying here quite clearly, and we're expressing it to you, Jamie, is that local government change without addressing the issue of the financial sustainability is pointless. You can't have one without the other. You've got to have the local government reform and you've got to deal with that fiscal issue, particularly for the West Coast. Mark.
Stewardship land. So New Zealand First, correct me if I'm wrong, had a pretty strong stance on stewardship land, but is that still the same? And that's sort of, we've missed the boat really as the West Coast, I think, some of that. Is that open for discussion again?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the minister's gone through a process of assessing, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't read it recently, but I think before Christmas he released his some decisions around bits that were to be, you know, that were no longer to be stewardship land. He classified some of them into a little bit of national park, other tenure. And so if there's so New Zealand First position historically has been to support that work to be done and the less significant conservation stuff to be made available for development.
Yeah. So we haven't missed the boat there.
No, not New Zealand First.
Yeah,
because we believe that the Dock Estate has huge potential to add economic value or stimulus to the region. Without compromising core conservation.
100%, because it's 84% of our land mass, right?
36.
86, yeah.
And
Yeah, it's actually there, Jamie, I think, because there's that's like a huge area with so-called pests in that we're spending millions of dollars on trying to control, which is not working. If you go back to the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we didn't pay a cent to control deer or goats or anything because they were all harvested commercially and in a sustained industry. Brought money in for it. And we need to go back to that. So, and I've got emails from professional hunters and game meat people, and the regulations are just making it too hard for them. They got to get like all property owners within 4 kilometres of a property that they got permission to hunt on. They got to get all the owners of properties within 4 kilometres of that farm or whatever they're hunting to sign a thing to say that they've been poisoned ground, and it's just too hard for them. Right. So hence here's all our pests are breeding up. So we need to look at a different solution.
So I think it needs to be looked at as a you've got to get some certainty and some long-term thinking around it, whether that's, you know, and again, I'm not a hunter myself, so I don't know the full ins and outs, but there's clearly, you know, it's got to be a planned approach, and whether that's cleaning out an area and then moving somewhere else or however you sustain that is I think the approach that New Zealand First has previously indicated in earlier policy.
So Jamie, just in fairness to the last candidate, I'll ask you the same question. What's happened in the past is that central government has pushed more and more responsibility onto local government without resourcing. Will New Zealand First in the future ensure that whenever additional obligations are passed from central government to local government, that resourcing will come around?
Yeah, if there's additional, we're more about reducing the red tape and the complexity of the the local government space, like the regional councils. But absolutely, it's got to be. It's it was a frustration of us, and it creeps all these little things that get added on, and councils are the last man standing often. I know that better than most with having been in that space. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we think this is this is like looking at the broader national picture, and we think this election is pivotal election for New Zealand, but I think especially it is for the West Coast. There are political parties who are campaigning on reversing decisions made under fast track. And I heard there was a question to previous speaker, and they have been quite articulate. They've named them, and one of them is consents issued in the mining space, and so it's obvious what effect that would have on some of our communities, particularly in Bulla, but I think it's broader than that. It is loss of that bulk coal off the Inniston, off Stockton, compromises the viability of the Midland line, which adds cost, at very least adds cost to Westland Milk Products, or it adds another 120,000 tonne a year of milk powder onto the roads to get it off the West Coast. So there's a whole lot of cascading impacts of that
Tourism.
of that. Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much, Jamie. Thanks for taking the time to come along and speak to us and to all those online. Very much appreciate your time. Thank you.